The member for McMahon.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. This morning, when speaking about Labor's negative gearing policy, the Treasurer said, and I quote, "That's 3 strikes and you're out." Is the Treasurer aware that the BIS Shrapnel report was paid for by an anonymous client with a commercial interest, confused the GDP of Australia and New Zealand, and was done before Labor's policy was even released? Isn't it 3 strikes and you're out for the Treasurer?
Yeah.
Treasurer has the call.
The member for McMahon for his question, and I refer him to the comments of his own alleged modeller, Mr Holden, Professor Holden. And when he was asked 12 months ago about negative gearing, this is what Professor Holden said. He said, "Ending negative gearing could obliterate the housing market and a minimum would hurt those invested in rental properties." That's what the good friend of the member for Fraser, the member for Fraser blogs on attending weddings with their modellers, Mr Speaker. And in this case, we have his comment in relation to negative gearing, Mr Speaker. He also makes reference to the fact about the timing of Bish Shrapnel's report, Mr Speaker. Well, the McKell report, which those opposite rely on, was published 6 months before Labor's announcement, Mr Speaker. And the NatSem modelling, on which they rely on, this is all the modelling they talk about, Mr Speaker, that was published nearly a year before Labor's policy was released, Mr Speaker. So those opposite have not only modelled their own policy, now when a respected organisation like Bish Shrapnel, Mr Speaker, have conducted work on key elements of the policy which has been put forward, and as the Prime Minister said, not in their wildest dreams could have Bish Shrapnel predicted that Labor would not only smash negative gearing in the way they proposed to do it, but on top of that would actually put up the capital gains tax by 50% on those same investments, Mr Speaker. They couldn't even imagine a policy that would be so daft. And he makes reference again to this typo in the front of the report, Mr Speaker, and what it was referring to was $1.9 trillion in terms of the average of the economy over the next 10 years, Mr Speaker, and the MyEFO forecasts themselves have a medium-term projection which is consistent with that, Mr Speaker, which I would suggest to the member for McMahon that he might want to familiarise himself with. This is the member for McMahon when he wrote in his own book he couldn't get $500 million and $500 billion worked out, Mr Speaker. So the member for McMahon is out there with a policy which we know is going to attack homeowners, it's going to attack renters, Mr Speaker, and it's going to attack investors. And who are those investors, Mr Speaker, that he wants to attack? As we've said time and time again, Mr Speaker, 2/3 of those claiming net rental losses have a taxable income of $80,000 or less, Mr Speaker. 2/3, Mr Speaker. And what those opposite are doing are saying to them, the policemen and the policewomen and the nurses and the teachers and the paramedics and the mums and dads and the servicemen and women, they're saying it's over. It's over. You can't go out there and invest like you have to try and make a future for yourself, Mr Speaker. They're only going to preserve that right to chief executives earning $2 million a year and $100,000 a year in share dividends.